He had everything: power, wealth, and respect. But years away from home changed more than he could imagine. When the billionaire finally returned, he expected to see his daughter living in comfort, cared for by the fortune he left behind. Instead, he stumbled upon a scene that froze him in disbelief. His only child standing outside a neighbor's house, her hands trembling as she begged a black maid for food. Shame, confusion, and anger collided in his chest. How had it come to this? And what dark truth was hidden behind this moment? Before his long absence, the billionaire's world was untouchable. Mansions, cars, and servants surrounded his family, and his daughter grew up shielded from struggle. To him, money solved everything. If you had enough of it, problems stayed far away. But business deals overseas pulled him away for years. He left believing his fortune would protect those he loved. What he didn't know was how quickly fortunes can shift. In his absence, dishonest partners drained his empire. Accounts froze, properties were seized, and whispers of his downfall spread. The lavish home turned into empty halls, and the servants who once obeyed disappeared one by one. His daughter, once dressed in silk, found herself waking up to hunger. Neighbors avoided them. Old friends turned away. The powerful name they carried was now a burden, a shadow of betrayal and humiliation. Among those who remained visible in the neighborhood was the black maid who worked next door. She wasn't rich, nor was she treated with respect by many, but she was steady, present, and hardworking. From the windows of her fading home, the girl would watch the maid carry groceries, prepare meals, and tend to her employer's children. To a child who once had everything, that ordinary stability now looked like salvation. It was in that fragile state that the billionaire, finally returning, arrived to see the unimaginable. His daughter, his pride, his legacy, standing on a neighbor's step, begging the maid for food. The billionaire froze in place, his breath caught in his chest. For years he had imagined the grand reunion, his daughter running into his arms, their home alive with warmth and comfort again. Instead, the sight before him felt like a cruel punishment. His daughter's small voice trembled as she whispered to the maid asking for bread. Her hands clutched the edge of her tattered dress, the fabric a painful reminder of how far they had fallen. The black maid glanced at her with pity, though her face carried the exhaustion of her own daily struggles. She stepped inside without a word and returned with a single plate, simple bread and a few scraps. She placed it in the girl's hands gently as though it were a treasure. The billionaire's daughter mumbled a thank you, her cheeks red with shame, and began to nibble quietly as though afraid someone might see. The father's heart twisted. Rage at his betrayers, guilt for leaving, and confusion at the world's cruelty swirled inside him. How had everything collapsed so completely? He wanted to storm into his old mansion, demand answers, reclaim his throne, but the reality was undeniable. The locks had changed. The guards he once paid now worked for new masters. His empire had slipped through his fingers, and no amount of shouting would bring it back. As he stood in the shadows watching, his pride battled with his humanity. A part of him wanted to snatch his daughter away, shield her from this humiliation, but another part forced him still, because in that moment he saw a truth he had never recognized before. All his wealth, power, and prestige had blinded him to life outside his circle. He had never noticed how the black maid carried herself with quiet strength, never thought about her sacrifices or how often people like her endured invisible hardships. Yet here she was, the one person who showed kindness to his daughter when the world turned its back. The girl returned the next day, and the next. Sometimes for bread, sometimes for leftover rice, sometimes just for comfort. The maid never refused her. Her eyes were tired, her hands rough, but she always made space. She knew what it meant to be hungry. She knew what it meant to be ignored. The billionaire, still hiding in shame, followed from a distance, unable to face his child yet. Each visit cut deeper than the last. He remembered boardrooms filled with men who bowed at his word, friends who clinked glasses to celebrate his success, politicians who sought his approval. Where were they now? Not one had stepped forward to help his daughter. Not one had offered dignity or shelter. Only the woman the world dismissed, the black maid, had shown compassion. The realization weighed on him like chains. His pride had cost his family everything, and the very person society had taught him to overlook had become his daughter's lifeline. But his silence couldn't last forever. As he saw his child shrinking into herself, shame eroding her spirit, he knew he would have to step forward. He would have to face her tears, her questions, and his own failures. The moment was approaching when the truth would burst open, when father and daughter would collide in the raw pain of what their lives had become. And in that collision, the world's harshest truths about race, class, and humanity would reveal themselves. The day came when the billionaire could no longer stay hidden in the shadows. His daughter, thinner now with hollow eyes, stood outside the maid's home again. But this time her trembling voice broke as she whispered, "Please, I'm so hungry." The maid, though weary from her own endless work, reached for her once more. Her arms opened not just to give food but to give comfort, and that was the moment he stepped forward. "Stop," his voice cracked, not with power but with pain. His daughter spun around and the sight of him left her frozen. For a heartbeat she couldn't breathe. This wasn't the triumphant father she remembered. His face was gaunt, his clothes worn, his eyes heavy with regret. Tears welled in her eyes as bread slipped from her fingers. "Papa?" she whispered. He wanted to run to her, to promise her safety again. But as he moved closer, the maid placed herself between them. Her stance wasn't of defiance but of protection, as if shielding the girl from yet another disappointment. In that gesture, he saw everything: her courage, her dignity, her quiet rebellion against a world that had dismissed her worth. The billionaire fell to his knees. Pride shattered, his voice trembled. "I left you with nothing. I thought money would keep you safe. But it was never enough. I failed you." Silence hung heavy, broken only by the girl's sobs. She dropped into his arms, clinging to him, her small body shaking with years of fear and hunger. For the first time he felt not like a billionaire, not like a man of power, but like a father. Broken, humbled, desperate to rebuild. And above them the maid watched. She had no riches to give, no influence to command. But in this moment she had given more than gold. She had preserved a child's dignity when no one else would. The billionaire's eyes met hers, and shame burned deeper than any loss of wealth. He finally understood. What he had dismissed as servitude was in truth the strength that kept humanity alive. In the days that followed, the billionaire's world shifted. The man who once measured life in profits and power now woke each morning with a single thought: how to keep his daughter fed, safe, and hopeful. Gone were the days of servants waiting on his command. Instead, he found himself standing beside the very woman he had never noticed before, the maid who had given his child food when the world turned its back. He offered her gratitude, awkward at first, broken by shame. She didn't respond with bitterness or gloating. Instead, she gave a quiet nod, as if to say she understood what loss felt like. Life had humbled her long before it humbled him, and yet, in that humility, she carried more dignity than he ever had. The daughter, though scarred by humiliation, began to heal in her father's arms. She learned that strength wasn't in wealth or titles, but in compassion, endurance, and truth. And slowly she began to smile again. Small, fragile smiles, but real. For the billionaire, the lesson was carved into his soul. He saw how society ignored people like the maid, how the very backbone of communities, those who worked quietly, tirelessly, unseen, were treated as less. But when his empire crumbled, it was not his powerful friends who saved his daughter. It was the woman the world overlooked. And that truth burned in him. As he looked out over the neighborhood, he realized his story wasn't just about one fall from grace. It was about the illusion of wealth, the lies of superiority, and the undeniable strength of those society tries to silence. He asked himself a question that haunted him. How many children had begged unseen? How many voices had cried out in the dark, ignored because of the color of their skin or the weight of their poverty? His fortune might be gone, but the real inheritance he could give his daughter now was different. A vow to see, to stand, and to fight for the dignity of every life. Because in the end, wealth fades, but humanity, shared, respected, and defended, is the only fortune worth keeping.